Thousands of years ago, deep within the heart of impenetrable rainforests, lived a society that stood as one of the most sophisticated civilizations ever known, the Maya. While the great cultures of Harappa and Mesopotamia were still finding their form, the inhabitants of this region were already mapping the stars and calculating celestial movements without the aid of a single telescope. They erected colossal stone temples and towering pyramids that challenged the sky itself. Their mathematical calendar became so legendary that in 2012 it sparked a global frenzy over the potential end of the world. But a mystery remains. How did such a brilliant people live? What did they eat? And why do some of their ancient rituals seem so terrifying to us today? To uncover the secrets of the Maya's unique traditions and their incredible journey, stay with us until the end of this video. Our chronicle begins in the year 1839. During that era, maps of Central America showed this vast region as an empty void. It was widely believed that human life could not possibly survive in such treacherous jungles, a place ruled by disease, venomous creatures, and primal fear. However, two undaunted explorers, John Lloyd Stevens and Frederick Catherwood, refused to believe the maps. They had heard local legends of cities of stone hidden beneath the vines, stories that most scholars dismissed as myth. They ventured into the dark, suffocating wilds of Honduras, where the canopy was so thick it stayed dark even at high noon. Every step was a battle against nature. After weeks of grueling travel and battling illness, they were on the verge of giving up. Suddenly, while clearing a path, an axe struck something unnaturally solid. As they cleared away centuries of moss and thick vines, they were stunned. It wasn't just a rock, it was a massive, intricately carved stone pillar covered in an ancient, forgotten language. Looking up, they realized they weren't standing in a forest, but at the foot of a magnificent stone temple. This was the city of Copan, a metropolis as grand as the pyramids of Giza, yet hidden from the eyes of the world for a millennium. This revelation shocked the globe, pulling the veil back on the supreme Maya civilization. If we look at their territory today, it spans modern-day Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and parts of Honduras. Around 4,000 years ago, while the cities of the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia were thriving, the Maya were expanding their empire in a completely different corner of the world. Until the late 20th century, archaeologists had very little information. We assumed these jungles held only a few isolated temples used for occasional worship. We believed the population was small and scattered. We were wrong. It took us over a century to realize the truth. In 2018, science provided a revolutionary breakthrough called LiDAR, or light detection and ranging. Researchers equipped a plane with a LiDAR scanner and flew it over the dense forests of northern Guatemala. This device fired billions of laser pulses toward the ground, piercing through the thickest foliage to map the terrain in 3D. When the computers stripped away the digital shadows of the trees, experts were left speechless. What we thought was a simple forest was actually a sprawling, high-tech megalopolis. Buried beneath the soil were more than 60,000 structures. LiDAR proved that the Maya population wasn't in the thousands, but exceeded 10 million people. At its peak, this jungle empire was more densely populated than almost any European nation of that time. This discovery presented a massive puzzle for scientists. Every other great civilization in history, Egypt, China, India, developed on the banks of major rivers. But the Maya story was different. Maps showed that in a huge portion of their empire, there were no major rivers at all. The ground was made of porous limestone, acting like a giant sponge that soaked up every drop of rainwater, leaving the surface dry. This raises a vital question. Why would 10 million people choose to live in a place as dry as a desert?
Where was the water for their crops? How did they build skyscrapers in a place where the soil wasn't even fertile? Were they hiding from a great threat, or did they possess a secret technology that the rest of the world lacked? To solve this, we must go back much further, not 4,000 years, but 20,000 years, to the peak of the Ice Age. During this time, the world was covered in ice, and sea levels were so low that a land bridge connected Asia and America. A group of hunters crossed this frozen path into a new world.
Over thousands of years, their descendants migrated south, crossing the plains of North America and the rugged mountains of Mexico until they reached the Yucatan Peninsula. To the first settlers, the Yucatan looked like paradise, lush greenery and fruit-laden trees, but the reality was harsh. Because of the limestone, the rain vanished instantly into the earth. Surface rivers were non-existent. They flowed deep underground. Animals were dying of thirst, and farming seemed impossible. The green paradise was an illusion. So why did they stay? Because they discovered the gates to the underworld. These were deep, massive, natural pits in the earth, known as cenotes. When they peered into these dark abysses, they saw something shimmering below, pure, fresh, sweet water. These cenotes were essentially massive natural wells connected to a vast underground river system. To the Maya, these weren't just water sources, they were xibalba, portals to the spirit world. They believed the rain god Chak lived within these caves. This spiritual connection to water is what forced them to settle in this difficult terrain. While the rest of the world built near rivers, the Maya built their entire civilization around these miraculous sinkholes. With water secured, the Maya faced their next battle, the jungle itself. The forest was so thick it was impossible to clear with primitive tools, so they turned to fire. Using slash and burn techniques, they cleared sections of the forest and used the nutrient-rich ash as fertilizer. This led to their greatest invention, maize or corn. By selectively breeding wild grasses, they developed the corn cob we know today. This crop was so high in energy that it fueled a population explosion, allowing them to transform from wandering tribes into the masters of the rainforest. The Maya had water and food, but they lacked something every other major civilization had: metal. While the rest of the world was using iron and bronze to build empires, the Maya had only stone. This was a challenge even more difficult than the water shortage. How do you build grand cities, towering pyramids, and ornate temples in the middle of a jungle without metal tools? In the Old World, buildings were carved with iron chisels and hammers. The Maya didn't have a single scrap of iron, copper, or steel. They didn't even have the wheel to transport goods, nor did they have horses or oxen to pull heavy loads. Imagine the sheer willpower required to carve millions of tons of stone and lift them hundreds of feet into the air using nothing but human muscle. This is perhaps the greatest wonder in the history of architecture. Their secret weapon was another stone, obsidian. This is a black volcanic glass. When broken, its edges are sharper than a modern surgical scalpel. The Maya realized that if nature gave them this super blade, they didn't need iron. Using obsidian and other hard stones, they carved entire mountains into art.
To move these massive stones, some weighing many tons, they used physics and raw manpower. They used rounded tree trunks as rollers and pulled the stones with heavy ropes. But their method of pulling was incredibly painful. Instead of using their shoulders, they tied the ropes around their foreheads using a strap called a mekapal. By leaning forward and using the full strength of their necks and backs, they dragged these massive blocks through the jungle. Their most impressive construction achievement was Maya cement. They discovered that by burning limestone in high-heat kilns, they could create a powder that, when mixed with water, turned into a rock-hard plaster. Today, we see gray, weathered ruins, but in their prime, these cities were stunning, covered in brilliant red and white plaster that shimmered in the sun. This technique was so powerful that even thousands of years of tropical downpours haven't been able to fully erase it. When these massive structures were completed, they weren't just buildings, they were speaking palaces. If you visit the pyramid at Chichen Itza today and clap your hands at the base, the echo that returns isn't a clap, it sounds exactly like the chirp of a sacred bird. Scientists discovered that the stairs were engineered at a specific angle so that the sound waves would transform into the call of the sacred Tetzel bird. Modern acoustic engineers would need advanced software to do this today, yet the Maya did it with nothing but stone. Unlike Egyptian pyramids, which were mostly tombs, Maya pyramids were massive scientific instruments for calculating time. Take the Pyramid of El Castillo. It has 91 steps on each of its 4 sides. If you add the top platform, it totals exactly 365, one for every day of the solar year. The real magic happens twice a year during the equinox. The sun hits the steps in such a way that the shadow creates the image of a massive serpent slithering down the pyramid. This wasn't luck. It required a precise understanding of the sun's angle over thousands of years. The Maya were not just laborers, they were world-class mathematicians and astronomers. Without computers or telescopes, they made celestial calculations that NASA scientists today consider to be perfectly accurate. They independently discovered the concept of zero long before most of the world. While Europeans were struggling with complex Roman numerals, Maya priests were performing calculations involving billions. Their math was simple but brilliant. A dot represented 1, a bar represented 5, and a shell symbol represented 0. With just these 3 signs, they mapped the universe. The Maya were obsessed with the stars. They measured the cycles of the planets with incredible precision. Their favorite planet was Venus. They didn't see it as a symbol of love, but as a god of war. They could predict the rising and setting of Venus with an error margin of only a few seconds. They built advanced observatories like El Caracol, which features windows specifically aligned to track the stars. This scientific prowess gave birth to the famous Maya calendar. You have likely heard the rumors that the Maya predicted the world would end in 2012. In reality, their calendar wasn't a warning of doom. The Maya didn't see time as a straight line. They saw it as a cycle. They believed history repeats itself. They created a long count calendar that spanned a massive cycle of 5,125 years. According to their math, this cycle began on August 11th, 3114 BC, long before the pyramids of Egypt were even built. That 5,125-year journey ended on December 21, 2012. For the Maya, this wasn't the end of the world. It was simply a reset, like a clock striking midnight. It marked the end of an old era and the birth of a new cycle. But what was life like for the average person in such a grand civilization? While the pyramids were magnificent, the gap between the rich and the poor was staggering. Society was split into 2 worlds. At the top were the kings and the nobles, living in opulent stone palaces in the city centers. They draped themselves in jaguar skins and the rare emerald green feathers of the quetzal bird. At the bottom was the common man. They lived in simple thatched huts made of mud and grass, designed to stay cool in the brutal tropical heat. Interestingly, they lived in large multi-generational families. Houses were built around a central courtyard where grandparents and relatives lived together, sharing their joys and sorrows. It was a vibrant, communal way of life. Surprisingly, Maya food was very similar to what we see today. They ground corn on stone slabs to make flour for tortillas, which they ate with beans, squash, and spicy chili salsa. The Maya loved spicy, flavorful food. Women were the backbone of this society. History often ignores them, but in Maya culture, they were the primary economic force. They controlled everything from weaving textiles to crafting artistic pottery and managing market trades.
Maya history even tells of powerful warrior queens like Lady Six Sky, who ruled empires and led armies into battle. They were as fierce as they were sophisticated. However, if you met an ancient Maya noble today, they might look like a nightmare. Their standards of beauty were extreme and, to us, painful. To look like the maize god, they would bind infants' heads between wooden boards to permanently flatten and elongate their skulls. A long, sloping forehead was considered the height of beauty. They also prized cross-eyedness. Mothers would hang a small bead between their children's eyes so they would constantly look at it, forcing the pupils to permanently turn inward. They even used obsidian saws to file their teeth into sharp points or drill holes in them to inlay jade stones, all without any anesthesia. To them, this wasn't just fashion, it was a test of endurance.
In Maya markets, there were no coins. Their currency was cacao beans, chocolate. You could buy a rabbit for 10 beans or a slave for 100. The most fascinating part? The kings didn't just hoard their money, they drank it. Consuming a bitter, spicy chocolate drink was a luxury reserved only for the elite. The Maya Empire wasn't a single unified country like modern China or the USA. It was a collection of rival city-states like Tikal, Calakmul, and Copan, constantly locked in a bloody game of chess. The kings were called Kuhul Ahau, or holy lords. People believed they weren't just men, but living gods who served as the bridge between heaven and earth. If a king was strong, it rained. If he was weak, the sun stopped shining. This belief led to constant warfare. But their wars weren't usually about land, they were about taking captives. They wanted high-ranking prisoners to sacrifice to the gods to keep the universe in balance. Crucially, they didn't decide to go to war on a whim, they consulted the heavens. Armies only marched when Venus was in a specific position, a practice historians called Star Wars. Despite the constant war, their urban planning was thousands of years ahead of its time. Since there were no rivers, they turned their entire cities into giant water reservoirs. Pyramids and plazas were sloped so that every drop of rain was funneled into massive underground tanks. The city of Tikal had such a perfect water system that they could survive an 18-month drought without anyone going thirsty. Even more incredible, they filtered their water. They used quartz and zeolite sand at the city entrances to purify the water, the same basic principles we use in modern RO or reverse osmosis systems today. 2,000 years ago, people in the middle of a jungle were drinking purified mineral water.
By 900 AD, the Maya were at their peak. The cities were vibrant, the pyramids were colorful, and the music of flutes and drums filled the streets. But then, everything went silent. Within just 100 years, the world's greatest cities were abandoned. 10 million people vanished. Historians call this a domino effect. To create the white plaster for their pyramids, they had to burn thousands of acres of forest to fuel the lime kilns. They destroyed the very jungle that gave them oxygen and rain. Without trees to hold moisture, the clouds disappeared. Scientists studying lake sediments have found that a mega drought lasted nearly 100 years, reducing rainfall by 70%. The exhausted soil could no longer feed 10 million people. The land turned into a barren wasteland. Hunger forced people to drink contaminated water, leading to mass disease. The public, who once worshipped their kings as gods, realized their leaders could not bring the rain. They revolted. Neighboring cities began looting each other's food stores. It was no longer a war for honor, it was a war for a piece of bread. Eventually, the survivors abandoned the stone monuments and retreated back into small, simple villages in the forest. The jungle slowly reclaimed the limestone palaces, swallowing the Maya Empire until its rediscovery in 1839. The story of the Maya is a
testament to human genius and a warning about the fragility of our relationship with nature. They built a masterpiece out of stone only to see it fall.
The story of the Maya reminds us how powerful human intelligence can be and how fragile even the greatest civilizations are. What we build today depends on how well we understand nature tomorrow. If you found this story fascinating, don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible journeys into lost civilizations.